The scar on Taos 3 was a violent interruption to the desert's eternal silence, a furrow of scorched earth where the sky had seemingly collapsed. Jake Novick, a man who read the history of ships in their shattered hulls, crouched by the wreckage, coffee in hand, studying the anomaly. This wasn't the usual orbital debris. The metal shimmered with an organic, self-healing quality, pulsing like a dying heart. It was elegant, expensive, and unmistakably alien. Jake knew the salvage station protocols: quarantine, report, wait. But the cockpit held a life, and Jake had never been one to let a rulebook stand in the way of a rescue. He cracked the seal of the sleek, teardrop canopy. Inside slumped a figure of striking, otherworldly grace, pale blue skin marked by shifting geometric tattoos, pointed ears, and armor that seemed to absorb the harsh desert sun. She was alive, but barely. Ignoring the frantic chirps of his station manager warning him of potential plagues and diplomatic disasters, Jake extracted her. He carried the stranger to his workshop, a sanctuary of jury-rigged electronics and spare parts, completely unaware that he had just altered the trajectory of galactic history by playing the Samaritan. She awoke 12 hours later with eyes of piercing gold and a cover story that was almost too perfect. Zara, she called herself, private security, cargo run, pirates. It was a narrative Jake had heard a dozen times from smugglers passing through the rim, but Zara didn't move like a smuggler. As she recovered, and they began the arduous task of repairing her ship, the discrepancies in her tale began to mount like pressure in a sealed tank. She possessed an intuitive grasp of advanced engineering that bordered on the supernatural, rerouting power couplings, and optimizing energy flows with a casual brilliance that left Jake stunned. She claimed she had good teachers, but her hands moved with the muscle memory of a master architect, not a hired gun. In the quiet hum of the workshop, amidst the smell of ozone and hydraulic fluid, a strange camaraderie bloomed. There is a profound honesty in shared labor, a stripping away of pretense that often reveals the person beneath the persona. Yet every time Jake probed her background, asking about the galactic core or the specific military nature of her armor, she deflected with a diplomat's skill. It wasn't until the fourth day that the truth slipped through the cracks. Jake caught a glimpse of her communication panel, noticing the encryption headers on incoming messages. They weren't military standard, they were royal. "Your Imperial Majesty," the logs read. The confrontation that followed was quiet but seismic. Zara didn't deny it. The armor, the knowledge, the regal bearing, it all coalesced into a terrifying reality. She was the Empress of the Veltani Empire, fleeing a coup led by traditionalists who viewed her progressive policies as weakness. She was hiding in a scrapyard to prevent a civil war. But secrets of this magnitude have a way of echoing across the void, and their sanctuary had an expiration date. The proximity alarm screamed a warning just as the final repairs clicked into place. 3 Imperial warships dropped out of hyperspace, their intent unmistakable. They weren't there to rescue, they were there to erase. "We have to go," Zara commanded, her voice shedding its casual warmth for the steel of absolute authority. The escape plan was desperate, a single-seat fighter for 2. Jake jammed himself into the claustrophobic darkness of the cargo compartment, a space meant for luggage, not life. What followed was 43 minutes of adrenaline and terror. From his cramped vantage point, Jake watched the tactical displays as Zara piloted the ship with a neural interface. Her mind melded directly with the vessel's core. She didn't just fly. She danced through the vacuum, executing maneuvers that defied the laws of physics to evade the gravity net trying to pin them to the planet. The ship groaned under the stress, metal crying out against the G-forces, but Zara held the line. They were a gnat fighting a hurricane, but the gnat had the mind of an empress. With the hull screaming, they broke the planet's gravity well and punched into hyperspace, leaving the hunters clawing at stardust. Their destination was Veltani Prime, a world that was less a planet and more a monument to civilization, a massive artificial structure housing billions, glittering like a jewel in the dark. Landing at the Imperial Palace was a surreal transition from the dusty solitude of Taos 3. Here, surrounded by crystalline spires and the weight of millennia, the stakes became terrifyingly real. Admiral Thevar, the architect of the coup, had mobilized the Eighth Fleet, claiming the Empress was dead. The Empire stood on the brink of fracturing into chaos. The Chancellor advised a show of military might, a clash of fleets that would burn worlds to save the throne. But standing on the precipice of war, Zara looked at Jake, the engineer who had fixed her ship and treated her as a human being rather than a deity. She realized that the old ways of secrecy and domination were the very rot threatening her reign. She chose a different path. "We won't fight them with weapons," she declared, watching the fleets gather on the sensors. "We will fight them with the future." The plan was a masterstroke of technological diplomacy. In a frantic 48 hours, the palace transformed into a hub of negotiation. Jake took center stage, translating the secrets of Veltani innovation for ambassadors from across the galaxy. Would you share your greatest secrets to save your future? Subscribe if you believe in bold choices. Zara offered the Empire's most guarded technologies, neural interfaces, sustainable energy, advanced medical synthesis, to her neighbors in exchange for alliances. It was a gambit that undercut the very foundation of the coup, turning potential enemies into vested partners. When Admiral Thevar arrived to demand her abdication, he didn't find a vulnerable monarch. He found a united galactic coalition. His narrative of a weak empress crumbled against the reality of a leader who had strengthened the empire by opening its doors. The fleet stood down. The coup dissolved not in blood, but in the face of a better idea. In the calm that followed, as the galaxy began the slow work of integration, Zara found Jake on a balcony overlooking the city of light. The formal distance of the court tried to assert itself, but they had shared too much survival to stand on ceremony. She offered him a new life, chief engineer for interspecies technological cooperation. It was a role that promised endless challenges, political headaches, and the chance to build a universe defined by connection rather than conquest. "Will I still get to have casual conversations with you?" Jake asked, the question hanging between the engineer and the Empress. "Just Zara," she smiled, the same genuine smile that had graced his humble workshop. Jake looked out at the infinite horizon, where ships from 100 worlds now moved in harmony. He had spent his life salvaging the past, but now, standing beside the woman who had crashed into his world and rewritten gravity, he was ready to engineer the future. He accepted the job, knowing that while the work would be hard, the company would be extraordinary. After all, the best stories don't end at the crash site. They begin with the repair.